What should you do if the trees begin to talk? I am Vlad Shoot's Story, and as usual, I'm here to share some beautiful and original things with you. A particular M16. This is an American M16A1. The M16 in its many evolutionary iterations is the standard weapon to this day of the United States Army. Since the 1960s, the history of the evolution of the adoption of the M16 is linked to that of the concept of intermediate cartridge. Already in Korea, for example, the Americans used the M1 carbine and the M2 carbine a lot, which indeed uses a kind of intermediate cartridge. However, its performance was unsatisfactory for many tasks. It was actually designed as a self-defense weapon for troops such as drivers, mortar servants, etc. In the 40s and 50s, NATO experimented with various calibers and various ammunition in order to adopt a single caliber for its own forces and a single weapon for its own forces. The process is very troubled, and in the United States there is probably a lot of corruption involved. Essentially, NATO wants to adopt the Belgian Fusil Automatique Léger in an almost intermediate caliber. The United States opposes. The United States wants a caliber for a full power rifle. The compromise will be that all of NATO adopts the Fusil Automatique Léger, but that it is in the caliber that becomes the 7.62 NATO. Only the United States does not respect the agreement made and introduces the M14. The M14 will probably be the worst rifle ever used by the United States. Today it is used in some situations as a sniper rifle, chosen because it is essentially a precise weapon. But at the time, despite nearly 12 years of development, it had many problems. It was not a good weapon. It was completely uncontrollable in automatic fire. It was very precise, both in single shot, but it was quite heavy. It was essentially a readapted M1 Garand. It took them 12 years to use another cartridge. It was not a successful weapon, and it was not a successful weapon when the United States got involved in the Vietnam War, in firefights, often very close with the Vietnamese, whether they were Viet Cong or regular army fighters. American soldiers armed with M14S were often at a disadvantage against the Kalashnikov. There was a need for a weapon that fired an intermediate caliber similar to that of the Kalashnikov, and that was lighter. And in America, such a weapon is essentially ready. The M14 was chosen over other competitors during the adoption process, ultimately winning due to political reasons. And quite a bit corruption probably behind. But one of these entries was a rifle from Armalite, the R10 designed by Eugene Stone. The R10 was a surprisingly light rifle for the caliber it fired. At first, like every weapon, it had some problems. It didn't unjustly probably win the competition to become the M14, but it was noticed by a few small states, the Dutch, the Portuguese. There was a smaller and reduced version of the R10, the R15. The rifle had a truly innovative construction. First of all, it used a particular gas system, which we could say a pseudo-direct take. Let me explain a bit better when I disassemble it what is it about. But which made shooting particularly pleasant, because all the force of the recoil was perfectly in line with the barrel, from the shoulder to the exit of the barrel. Everything happens in just one line. Also, its construction, very light. It is essentially made so that the bolt engages. An extension of the barrel and the bolt, this extension, the barrel, are the components that must withstand the pressure. The rest, no. The rest can be made of plastic, light aluminum. And the weapon in general is very light indeed. It's surprisingly light for being a quite long weapon, much, much lighter than the Kalashnikov, I assure you. The M16s were praised for their durability, for their reliability, for their accuracy. And you might say there will be many keyboard fanboys who instead migrate the M16 favoring, for example, the K. It's a half-truth. The first M16s in Vietnam had problems mainly caused by the ammunition and the magazines. The magazines that were those of 20 rounds, this is a new model of magazine, the one of 30 had problems. In addition, the ammunition that was essentially used caused a lot of deposits, a lot of dirt. And since in this weapon the gas is pushed into the bolt, it ended up that without cleaning they started to have problems. Furthermore, the soldiers who received the first M16s were not properly trained to clean it, to maintain it. That's why the problems it had at the beginning in Vietnam were solved quite quickly. The issue was resolved with new similar ammunition that didn't cause the problem. and with the introduction of the A1 model, which is this one we have here. Let's see. The A1 model first introduced a 30-round magazine, although in many photos you will see A1 Model S with still the 20-round magazine. There were many around, they also used those. Furthermore, it added this element, which is called forward assist, which allows, in case of dirt inside the action, to properly close the shutter. It's essentially from the A1 Rascal we really have a reliable M16 that will really last a long time. Before moving on to the mechanics, I wanted to make an important clarification for when you talk about this weapon with other people. The Armalite rifle, 15 is the commercial model. All weapons of this type are Armalite rifle. 15S. The M16, on the other hand, is an R15 adopted for use that meets certain standards. So the M4 is the adopted carbine by the American Army, but it's still an R15. It's time to see a bit how it works. The M16 is a selective fire assault rifle. It can shoot both automatic and semi-automatic, although the automatic is used relatively little. The construction makes heavy use of plastic and aluminum elements. I guarantee the M16 is lightweight for its size. On the left side, we observe these controls. The selector is the safety, and the release lever is the shutter when it remains open with the empty magazine. I'll show you. See that the shutter is open. If I push the lever from this side, the shutter goes out. This model, as you can see, among other things, an original military model, it's a bit in poor condition, but it's okay because it works. The M16 has a bad reputation from early models used in Vietnam, but it's actually a solid and extremely reliable weapon. Especially in the later models, the ones that have solved most of the problems it had. As I mentioned to you, the genius of the M16 is in its operating system, in its mechanics that allow it to have all the recoil force. In L, in E with the shoulder. You see that the bolt here, therefore the barrel, is perfectly in line with my shoulder when I rest it. And this makes the weapon sway relatively little when fired. If you read about this system on Wikipedia, they will tell you that a direct gas grip is a half-truth. It's a pseudo-direct gas grip. Simply, the M16 is a bit of a category unto itself when it comes to the gas system. From this other side, we see the magazine release lever, the so-called forward assist, which allows me, in case the weapon is particularly dirty, to close the bolt. By hitting here, many people understood me. Many people don't like this feature, which for some even worsens the jams rather than solving them. We have the characteristic carrying handle, which actually once had another function. In the early R15 prototypes, the loading handle that is now placed here behind was up here. And simply this metal structure was protecting it. We obviously have the sights, as you can see moving forward. The sight, the typical muzzle brake. Look here how, for example, the grip is empty. To lighten it. It's certain that very light, the later models will be even lighter. Let's take a closer look inside to see how it works. To disassemble it, we obviously have to make sure it's unloaded. Great, let's remove the magazine. Now we have two parts that hold the bottom part together with the top part. We can push the rear one and the weapon simply opens up for us. If we want, we can also remove the other one, which will cause the two parts to separate. The nice thing about Armalite rifle, 15S and M16s by extension, is that these two pieces and their sizes are essentially standardized. And there are countless possible combinations that the lower part and the upper part can have. And this allows many different pieces to be mounted. And really every Armalite rifle, 15, is a bit different from the other, while maintaining certain equal characteristics. We can go beyond, we can remove the bolt lever. Loading lever. Let's take a closer look at the system. I forgot the recoil spring that stays inside the stock. Unlike other weapons, this one has no flying pieces and remains here. This is the port. Actuator with the shutter. This large open space essentially serves to let the hammer pass that then triggers the shot. Now, why pseudo-direct take? There was almost no gas. Here in the barrel, there is a small hole. The hole lets the gas into this tube that I don't know if you can see, that runs almost the entire length of the barrel until it reaches the action. And where does it end, this tube? In reality, it continues into the bolt carrier until it literally brings the gas inside the bolt. A direct impingement system would simply push the gas up to this point, and the bolt carrier would therefore receive a blow, going back and releasing the bolt, but it doesn't do that. The gas centers inside the bolt, which, if we could cut it, essentially, has rings to block the gas. There's an expansion chamber that essentially works like a piston. That piston that integrates the shutter causes the backward movement and therefore the unlocking of the weapon. There's a slight rotation, as you can see. So according to some definitions, this would be a direct impingement. According to others, since there's a gas piston, even if hidden inside the shutter, it's a short stroke piston weapon. It's actually a pseudo-direct impingement, but it's brilliant. This fact that the force to unlock the system is perfectly in line with the explosion is what makes the R-15 so pleasant to shoot. Because everything happens on a line, everything is easily controllable, things don't bounce around anywhere. A probable flaw is that the shutter inside becomes quite dirty because it is literally filled with hot gases. Another flaw it might have is that it gets quite hot. Indeed, at this point, normally the barrel is the element that heats up the most. The shutter not so much. Instead, in the Armalite rifle, 15, the shutter often becomes boiling hot. And guys, I want to tell you, this system is so brilliant that nothing has been invented yet that surpasses it. Really, an invention essentially from the late 50s is still the top of firearms engineering today. Literally, guys, there hasn't been a system invented yet that shoots more pleasantly than this, essentially. That's why it's so long-lasting. To reassemble it, we have to do the reverse process. First of all, we need to insert, let me find a good angle with the camera so you can see it too. We need to reinsert the loading way guide. Sorry, we leave it a bit out. At this point, we can put the shutter, everything goes inside. Now all we have to do is reassemble and assemble the two pieces together. And we're done. And there we have it. I'd say it's time to give it a try. Here we are with the M-16, which of course fires the 223 Remington 556 in the military version. Even though there's a small difference between the cartridges, it's okay anyway, because the 556S can fire the 223S. The reverse is a bit dangerous. We have our magazine. It's almost full. And when it's empty, the shutter stays open with the hold open. If you reloaded, you could simply insert another magazine. And I'm ready to shoot again. Well, what can I say? It's really enjoyable. The recoil is very much in line, as I've already told you, and you can really feel it going straight into the shoulder, rather than dancing a bit. That's why it is very easy to keep the sights on the target and continue to always shoot straight. It's no coincidence that it's one of the best rifles, both military and competition. As always, thank you for watching this video. Merry Christmas. Maybe it's already passed. I don't know when I will publish this video.